Deliciously with Ara. Today we're gonna make Galbi-tang. So subscribe and like! So Galbi-tang is basically beef rib stew, which we used to serve especially when we had guests, or it is a great way to increase our stamina as well. So for this, we need our beef ribs, which na pinahati ko na siya sa meat shop. As you can see, yung beef rib, it comes in big plank. So pinachop ko siya. And I had this babad in the water for at least 4 hours just because we want to remove lahat ng mga blood na nasa ating meat. The blood is what it makes, parang nagkakaroon siya ng malansang smell of the unpleasant smell of the taste and scent, aroma ng ating stew mamaya. So kailangan every hour change the water unless your beef is very, very fresh na bagong katay. Of course, we don't really need this kind of process, but normally mga ina-access natin sa mga groceries or market, it's been there for a couple of hours or even days. So much better to be safe. We have to babad this and keep on changing the water with fresh water for around every hour hanggang magiging pale na pale ang ating beef. And also we need this Korean tangmyeon or Korean Vermicelli Noodles, which we're gonna use it as one of our topping. So while I'm waiting for my pot to boil the water na pinaboil ko kasi blanch ko yung ating beef, I'm gonna also prepare my tangmyeon or the Korean Vermicelli Noodles. So this gives a good texture to our stew mamaya, and because this whole stew really takes time, para lang mag-save tayo ng oras, instead of boiling it, we can just soak it in hot water. So I got here, we just need very minimal. The amount I'm serving today, I'm preparing today is good for like 3 to 4 a family. So this 1 kilograms of beef ribs na pinachop ko na, and siguro like a good handful. So I'm gonna use probably 2 handfuls of my Korean vermicelli. And I have here hot boiling water. So we just have to babad this probably like around an hour while we're preparing the beef. So if not, you have to just parang nagmamadali kayo to prepare the tangmyeon, you have to do is just boil it mamaya. So while we have a lot of time, habang hinihintay ko, I'm gonna blanch my beef just to parang fully make sure na hindi magkakaroon ng parang malansang smell. And the very good Galbi-tang normally is when you have a very, very clear soup. And para tayo magkaroon ng clear soup, kailangan wala talaga siyang parang any blood na matitira sa ating beef, or else mabuboil, parang lalabas yung parang black, bubblish kind of, madudumihan yung parang hindi siya magiging clear ang ating stew. And for us to have a very clear soup for our Galbi-tang, when we get beef rib parts like this and chinop ko na siya, parang it can have a lot of fatty parts. And what we want to do is gusto ko tanggalin ang ating mga taba ng ating baka. Just so parang hindi magiging oily masyado ang ating stew. And for some parts na medyo parang mataba masyado yung laman, I'm just gonna give a big, like a slit. Just lang para maluto agad yung ating beef mamaya. And I've already trimmed my beef, removing the most na mga taba na inaalisan ko na. And as you can see, although I've had babad this in the water for like 4 hours, sometimes pwede siya magkakaroon still na, as you can see, parang nakakaroon pa rin ng blood na lumalabas sa water. So what we want to do is, before we make it into a stew, para maging super malinis ang kanyang broth mamaya, first we want to blanch it in hot water. So get a big, generous amount of water, boil natin siya. And we don't want to put this one habang hindi pa nagbo-boil yung water, kasi what I want to do is, on the hot water, parang fini-freeze ko muna lahat ng mga blood clots which may have still retained on the meat itself para ma-secure yung kanyang flavor. So pamaya pag gagawa tayo ng ating stew, lahat ng flavors na lalabas without making the broth itself na parang magkakaroon ng maraming bubbles na parang black bubbles that would come out normally when we cook beef. So I'm just gonna wait for my water to boil. So my water is boiling. I'm gonna already put in my beef. Para lang just to make sure na super malinis na malinis yung ating beef, free from all this bloods na lalabas mamaya. We're gonna just quickly cook it for like 5 minutes. Must try recipe! So as you can see, mga after 5 to 7 minutes, lumalabas, parang ang dami niya lumalabas mga bubbles. This is what we want to really get rid of because hindi siya magiging malinaw ang ating Galbi soup or Galbi-tang mamaya. So I'm gonna turn off the fire. Oops. And then, kunin ko yung ating beef. Sometimes may nag-aalala na baka matanggal daw yung smell ng flavor ng ating beef, but actually just by first stage of just like parang counting minutes lang naman ng pag-boil, it doesn't really affect the flavor of it. But what we just really want is we want to have a clean taste, pure taste ng ating beef. So I think that's gonna be very fine. And of course, we don't want to think na baka ito yung magiging intake natin. So this is how much I've already had it off. So kailangan balawan ko yung ating beef in running water, and also my pot. If the same pot ang gagamitin natin, kailangan we have to rinse it and we get a new clean pot to cook our galbi-tang. Stay tuned! So on the running water, if nababad natin siya ng matagal, you can see na hindi masyado magiging parang maraming black parts na lumalabas. And you can see na yung sa ating bones, tumigas na yung ating blood. So it will make our soup clearer mamaya. But still, I'm just gonna give a very clean rinse. And then remove also yung mga excess fats na hindi natanggal ng ating knife kanina para hindi maging oily ang ating soup. So after we wash our beef, kailangan our pot is also cleaned, or else yung mga impurities na dumikit sa ating pot kanina for blanching our beef, para it will go back and magiging use system ng ating paglinis na process. So now I have here my clean pot. I'm gonna fill this up with generous amount of water. The ratio I would like to suggest is like 1 to 3. So this is like 1 kilogram of beef ribs. So I'm gonna use 3 liters of water. So that's a good ratio. Although of course, ito ay sabaw, you can always freely adjust the level of amount you want sa ating soup. So I've already had 2 liters, which isang buo is 2 liters. I'm gonna add 1 more liter of my water. So magiging 1 to 3. And let's put into a boil. So before my water starts to boil, I'm gonna add in my beef na binalawan ko kanina. And I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of soy sauce para lang when the water is boiling together with my beef, mayroon na siya parang already a basic flavors of it. So just 1 tablespoon. Huwag mo masyadong marami because or else our soup will be very dark. So just 1 tablespoon para lang magkaroon ng konting touch of flavor ng ating soup. And I'm gonna cover this up. Then we're gonna start with our vegetables. So for our galbi-tang, the vegetables we need for our broth is very simple. Just 1 radish, leeks, and kelp. Basically, kelp is one of the most basic when we talk about Korean stew. It gives parang an added layer of a flavor. Wala siya talaga masyadong matapang na taste, but it kind of like makes it parang it rounds up. So I have here around generous amount. Normally when you go to Korean groceries, you can buy the kelp na buo. I normally cut them up and store it in my freezer, and parang it's just easy. And I have here around 6 pieces, or around like a palm, a size of your hand would be good enough. So I'm gonna add it already. And my isang buong radish, I'm just gonna remove the parts and then ipipil ko lang siya. So for my radish, I'm just gonna cut it like half lang. I'm not gonna slice this up because the purpose of my radish is para lang magkaroon ng additional layer ng flavor ng ating stew. And some galbi-tang or some people don't really like to have radish on their stew. So this is gonna be an optional na ingredient that which you can chop it up mamaya. So I'm just gonna add it buo. And because we're gonna boil this for a very long time, I think this is good enough to be cooked together as well. So isang buong radish na hinati ko lang. And then of course, I love having leeks, and one of the most common flavor when it comes to stew ng Korean food is of course our leeks. I have here around like a handful of my leeks. So I'm just gonna cut them up parang long inches lang. And I'm gonna probably save just few para lang sa ating garnish mamaya sa ating top. Yung medyo green part, and just parang may konting layer ng color, I'm gonna add a little bit of the light green parts. And lahat, I'm just gonna put it on my stew to boil together. And then we're gonna cover our pot, and kailangan kalimutan natin this for like an hour and a half. So on like medium to high fire, just keep boiling and boiling until maging super tender ang ating beef. So once the soup starts to boil, we have to remove the kelp because the kelp, kailangan siguro mga 5 to 8 minutes lang siya sa ating stew. If masyadong matagal, it can actually give a little bit of parang mapait na flavor somehow. So I want to remove this kelp. And because dahil napaka-masustansya naman the kelp, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save this mamaya. So we can also slice this and use it as a topping. Of course, it's very optional. And then after I remove my kelp, I'm just gonna cover my pot. keep boiling it for another like an hour and a half hanggang maging super tender ang ating karne. It's super masarap. So I've been boiling it for almost like an hour and a half, and as you can see, yung sabaw niya medyo kumonte because it evaporated. That's why I always recommended the 1:3 ratio. And because wala pa siyang lasa, now we're gonna add the flavors on it. And also, by the way, yung radish, it's very, very soft already. Tanggalin natin siya sa soup. So I'm gonna carefully remove my radish. And then ang gagawin ko is, later on, when I serve my soup, I'm just gonna slice a little bit of my radish, so parang topping na siya. But the leeks, iwanan ko lang siya. And then I'm gonna add some flavors, sweet, wala pa siyang lasa. I'm gonna add 1/2 teaspoon, parang konti lang, a touch of saltiness sa ating soup. We don't really want to parang gawin tamang-tama yung lasa ng ating soup because later on, Koreans don't really like salty soup, so we serve yung parang pang-adjust ng flavor niya individually. So just a slight touch lang para medyo maging malinam na. And because I don't want na magiging parang dirty yung kanyang soup. And as you can see, the stew is very clear. And once in a while, if you see like some fats, you can actually remove. And after adding my salt, I want to give a slight touch of my garlic flavor to my soup. Of course, Korean food, di ba, always may garlic. But dahil ayoko masira yung parang clearness ng ating sabaw, I got a small strainer. And then, we're just gonna parang try to cook the garlic within inside lang para magkaroon ng konting aroma and the flavors lang without parang changing yung parang looks niya. So my broth still looks very clean, but I have this kick of my garlic sa ating taste mamaya. Of course, Galbi-tang is very best when we cook in big batches with maraming beef, maraming water. Parang isang pagod na lang. But if you're gonna cook in like small batch like me, like a family serving lang, which is like good for like a family of 4, 1 kilogram lang, we can't really have that richness of the flavor because of the limited amount of beef we're putting in. And if you want to have this kind of kick na binibigay ng mga Korean restaurants, what you can add is a very, very slight touch of the MSG, the white MSG. I don't want to add a lot, but siguro like on a very big pinch. And we're gonna add it to our soup. It upgrades the flavor of my soup as if niluto natin siya ng maramihan or as if we ate it on a Korean restaurant. So that's a secret about it. And if you're very health conscious, ayaw na ng MSG, you can always omit. But why not to try once in a while, right? So now my broth is is already done with the flavors of it. I'm gonna already prepare how to serve it. So I'm gonna just remove yung ating mga leeks kanina, but retain the beef. So the leeks has already served its purpose na parang super cooked na. I'm gonna have it removed para very clear. All I have here is my beef and my soup. And it's always good to serve our galbi-tang on a very clay pot like this because it retains the heat of it. And we cooked kanina our galbi-tang. We have already babad here our Korean Vermicelli Noodles or the tangmyeon. So I'm gonna give a little bit of it. Because it's been soaked in hot water for almost an hour, it's totally cooked already. But if, kunwari, gumawa kayo ng malaking batch yung kailangan parang reheat lang, what you can do is give a quick, parang luto lang, mabilis lang, siguro mga 1 minute lang sa ating hot water. And then you can already add on our galbi-tang because the heat from the soup will also cook it. So we're just gonna put a little bit sa bottom. And then I'm gonna get some few pieces of my very tender na ating beef. And then the radish na kanya tinanggal ko, if I added this one too long, masyado magiging soggy na yung ating radish. So I'm just gonna give a big chunk of a slice lang. And then optional yung kelp na tinanggal natin because this is very, very healthy. Sayang lang naman talaga if you just throw it away. I'm gonna cut this in small strips. And also my leeks, which I saved earlier, just for added color. And then let's put our soup. So now our galbi-tang is already good to be served like this. But to give a little bit of more extra touch of it, we can actually add 1 egg. must-try recipe. Ta-da! So here is my galbi-tang. Very easy to make, however, the taste is one of the most proven recipe, which I'm pretty sure your family will all love. So hope you enjoy my recipe. See you next time. Bye! It's super masarap. And to enjoy our galbi-tang, it's also good to have a side dip, which is very easy with a little bit of our soy sauce. And if you have any kind of Dijon mustard or mustard, just on the side. This is a perfect dip for our galbi-tang. First, let's try the soup. Of course, with all the flavors blended on it. Very rich in flavor, very hot, so you have to be careful. And then let's get our beef, which super matagal na natin na boss. It's super tender, I can see. Be careful. And let's also get our beef, a little bit piece lang, and then let's put it on our special dip. Very simple, mustard and soy sauce. No need to go to Korean restaurants because this already is very authentic itself. I'm pretty sure you love it again. Bye! Enjoy!